Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. I want to share a story coming up next. A friend of mine has deprogrammed someone from the Black Lives Matter cult, and I'll tell you how he did that coming up in the next segment. But first, I want to talk about this article that Jordan Peterson wrote. Actually, before we get to that even, everything we're seeing right now was bound to happen. And for a while, there's nothing that can be done in the midst of it to an extent, right? So a lot of what we're seeing right now is baked in. It's sort of like COVID, right? You get the COVID, and then it's 2 weeks later before you get sick, and then it's like 2 weeks later before people start to die, right? So there's like a delay in it all. So a lot of what we're seeing right now is baked in. This is all reaping what has been sown decades in the making, decades of failing to educate kids about American history, decades of failing to educate kids about American exceptionalism and virtue. And it's not even just a sin of omission, right? It's more than not teaching our kids or adults to actively pursue a life of virtue. We're going to talk a lot more in the future here about the cardinal virtues. We should all have the cardinal virtues imprinted on our hearts and our thoughts, and every action filtered through the lens of prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Every single thing we do. What a completely different society we'd have if we studied these and if we knew them. And I mean, we knew them. Like in Jeremiah, it says, God knew you before you were born. And the word there, to know, gnosko, it's more than just a head knowledge. It's a super intimate heart knowledge, a soul knowledge. It's not like you cram for the exam the night before and you just regurgitate the information. That's not gnosko. It's a deep heart, soul knowledge. What if we knew these virtues? But anyway, it's one thing to not do that. That's a sin of omission. But colleges have become activist training grounds, just preaching and shaming people into the opposite of these things, right? And we can waste all day giving examples, but it's a college. It's now K through 12 too. You are out of your mind if you send your kids to a public high school right now. I don't know, it's easy for me to say, my kids are 3 and younger, but all this indoctrination is profoundly infiltrated, even K through 12. We're not going to do this today, but found a letter to the editor in the college newspaper, 1995, Notre Dame, from Hannah, the 1619 Project writer. And she talks about how all white people are bloodthirsty rapists and all these horrible things. But one of the things she talks about is how Africans came to the New World before, hundreds of years before Columbus did. You're like, what? What are you talking? Well, it's because she was been taught this Afrocentric view of the world. And there's a whole study and everything in there. But my point is, your kids are going to learn not only all this progressive Marxist nonsense, but they're also going to learn this Afrocentric stuff that African explorers came to the New World before Columbus even did. Like, what is going on? That's K through 12 now. Right? Okay, so that being said, Jordan Peterson wrote this great piece about this moment we're in, and he talked about universities across the West, how they've been devouring themselves over the last 20 years. He says he and others have served as a Cassandra. Cassandra was the priestess of Apollo, and her curse, I forget what she did that made her cursed, but she did something, and she was cursed to utter true prophecies, but never to be believed. So she's the one who said, hey, people of Troy, the Greeks are hiding in the horse. They're in the horse. Just open it up. Look, the Greeks are in there. And the people of Troy, they mocked her, they ridiculed her. So she grabbed a torch and she was gonna go burn the horse herself and kill the Greeks herself. And the people of Troy stopped her. She's like, you idiots, you have no idea. You guys are celebrating your great victory. You let them in the city. They're in the horse right now. And they never believed her, among other things. Anyway, Jordan Peterson said, actually, can we play, do we have the clip yesterday of the Marxists? This is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter just the other day. Here she is.
I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself, and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk.
One of Jordan Peterson's views or points is this Marxist stuff was not hidden from view ever. It was proudly declared the entire time that who these people are. The Marxists, the Greeks, at least they were in the horse. Right? The Marxists, they're not even hiding. They're not even in the horse hiding. They're just knocking on the gates, proudly proclaiming what they believe and who they are. And we've still let them in to every aspect of our pop culture. So he goes on, he gives a few examples. The reason I love these examples, and we're going to keep sharing examples like this, these are the ones that we don't hear about, right? There's some big examples of cancel culture that people hear about. But I think I don't say the problem with it, but what that lacks is there's like a disconnect. It's like, oh, well, that's that really super famous person who got canceled. I'll never get canceled. But when you hear these stories that no one talks about, you start to realize, that will be me, right? Because when you get fired, you're not going to make the news either. So Peterson tells a story of this top-notch professor in Canada. He's had 57 peer-reviewed papers, right? So he's first-class scientist, he's a chemist. And he wrote this paper. Part of it was about the transference of skills. So the mentor-mentee relationship, the master-apprentice relationship. And here's what he said about it. It's a little long, but it's important here because I want you to know this is why he got canceled here. He says, first, the knowledge in question the scientific knowledge in question must be transferred within 3 generations or risk being lost forever. Second, there must be an unconditional submission of the apprentice to his or her master. This applies not only to the sciences, but also in art, music, and martial arts. We get it and all that. Right? If someone's teaching you how to play the trumpet, right? You're the apprentice, and the master's like, oh, you need to do this with your lips or something. You're like, no, I know how to play the trumpet. I know what to do, you stupid mentor. Like that's not going to work. He says the same with sciences. Submission to one's mentor, however, is rarely attainable today. Many students are unwilling to submit to any level of hard work demanded by professors, and the university does not support professors in this endeavor, as it views students as financial assets and hence protects them from any undue hardships that may be demanded by their masters, right? This is the idea that the customer is always right, and the people paying $60,000 a year to go to the university, they're the customers. Whatever they say goes. The situation, coupled with the fact that professors have less time to mentor students in the laboratory, cannot provide for a productive transfer of skills, especially the maintenance of standards and integrity of research. Okay, that was part of a much longer paper. A bunch of things were done because of that. First of all, the paper was removed. The publisher offered an apology for daring to publish such scandalous, horrible things. The editors of the journal were suspended because the essay did not properly reflect fairness, trustworthiness, and social awareness. What the heck is that? What is trustworthiness? This is why I've said, I don't want to go down the whole thing. All the people who are getting canceled, they're going to get canceled for the most ridiculous things, like this. And it's going to be this weird newspeak, oh, you violated, you did not meet our standard of trustworthiness. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, you didn't meet our standard of social awareness. What do you mean? I'm a chemistry professor. I'm talking about like standards in a laboratory and research. I'm the mentor. I've been doing this for 40 years. You're the mentee. You just started. I tell you what to do. You need to do it because right? Oh, you're not socially aware. The editors, they said, were discriminatory, unjust, and inequitable in practice. Right? This professor also was eliminated from another journal called Highlights in Chemistry because of his racist thoughts, and a statement by the European Chemical Society has distanced themselves from him. And we also have a statement from Brock University. This is his university. Threw him under the bus. They said that his statements were highly questionable. The statements do not reflect the principles of inclusivity, diversity, and equity, which we talked about yesterday. Those are the 3 buzzwords. And just lest you believe that I'm leaving something out that he said that's actually the objectionable thing, This is the Brock University statement condemning him. The article contains descriptions of the graduate supervisor-graduate student relationship that connotate disrespect and subservience. Now, the rest of Peterson's article is about stories like this in the sciences. And he says this is going to hurt us all because qualified experts in the science fields are being pushed aside, and that's obviously going to have massive ramifications. Listen, it's one thing if you do this in art history even, or like basket weaving or women's studies or whatever stupid majors and courses are out there in universities these days. But when you do it in the sciences, there's some real hard ramifications of that for engineering and technological advancements, which obviously affect all of our standards of living. So that's a huge problem. So his conclusion, he says, wake up, STEM denizens. Your famous immunity to political concerns will not protect you against what is headed your way fast over the next 5 or so years. And I wanted to share that quote because I thought, 5 or so years? That's how long we're taught. That's a lot of reaping still to be done from all the sowing. He shares other stories of professors who did not articulate a sufficient DIE statement. That's the diversity, inclusion, equity that we talked about yesterday. If you missed yesterday's show, have you heard of this before, the DIE statements? You will soon. You'll have to sign one or be fired as well. Here's one problem of the mob. Within the mob, right, internal politics within the mob venerates, is that, I don't know if I like that word, it just lifts up, celebrates the most extreme people in the mob. So there's this internal contest to see who's the most pure, right? You got to prove that you're a member of this tribe and prove you're a member of the mob. And the best way to do that is to find racism in the most unlikely places. And if you can do that, you'll be rewarded for it within the mob. The perfect example is that noose in Oakland that we talked about yesterday, right? Guy puts up some exercise equipment in the trees, leaves a rope behind. Thousands of people walked by that rope. Thousands of people walked by it, either didn't see it or saw it and said, oh, look, there's a rope in the tree. But one person saw it and said, oh, a noose, oh! She cried back and called the news and got all these social points. That's the point. In her group, she has declared herself so pure of social justice heart, that she, and only she, was able to see a noose in that tree. No one else saw it. No one else is as pure and as woke as I am. They just saw a rope, but I saw a noose, and I saw the lived experiences of me and so many other millions of black people who have been victims of a noose and the lynch mob, blah, 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 right? In her world, that got her major street cred. Something I've said a lot before is that, and I kind of dismissed the mob because I thought the mob will eat itself. And it will. There's another story, we don't have time to share it here, but a writer in Canada 3 years ago talked about how white authors should be able to write about black characters or Hispanic characters or whatever. And there was a indigenous, queer, feminist writer who canceled him, led this movement to cancel him. He got kicked out of the Canadian Literary Society and all that stuff. She now has been kicked out of the mob because she hasn't been able to prove that she's indigenous enough to claim that she's indigenous. She's just a little bit of an Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas thing going on there, right? So she was in the mob that led the mob to cancel this one guy, and now she's been canceled from the mob as well. So like, this stuff eats itself. It's classic French Revolution. Like, not even Robespierre was virtuous enough to satisfy the demands of the mob. He was the mob, and then the mob went and cut his head off as well, right? So I've always thought that this whole thing would eat itself, so I kind of dismissed it. The problem is it may take a very long time to eat itself, and there's going to be a ton of collateral damage in the process. It will eat itself. But as Peterson said, it could take 5 years, and a lot of people lose their livelihoods in the process. So we can't wait for it to eat itself. It has to be stopped beforehand. So what do? I know Jesse and Buck are so on top of this, which is awesome. Courage. You can't ever capitulate, ever. Don't cave in, ever. You know, Mississippi, they're voting right now and getting rid of the Confederate imagery in their flag. You can't do it, not right now. Do not cave in. Every time you cave in, they get more power. You're feeding the beast. Next year, if things calm down, you can Like if we kill the beast, next year you can talk about removing that part of the flag or whatever you want to do in a much more reasoned and reasonable way. Okay, we can do that. Not now. Never give in to the mob ever. Jesse has a hilarious run of tweets where he'll show Black Lives Matter violence and he'll say, "What's going on, guys? We removed Aunt Jemima from the grocery stores. What are you doing?" He tweeted one yesterday. There's a mob beating up some white guy, and he said, "Yes, but this video was taken last week. Now L'Oreal has removed all whitening products from their product line, so surely none of this will continue anymore." It'll never stop. Stop feeding the beast. Have the courage to stand up, never capitulate. Coming up next, I want to share a story of my friend who deprogrammed someone in the Black Lives Matter cult. I'll tell you what he did next. True story, Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So a friend of mine was successful in deprogramming someone from the Black Lives Matter cult, and I want to tell you about what he did here. First, you have to be more outraged and therefore more morally superior, but more outraged against police brutality than they are, which is not fake. There's nothing fake about this. It's very doable. As a small government person, the police are an arm of the government. We entrust the police, this part of the government, with certain powers and duties and responsibilities. So don't betray us with this authority that we give you, right? So any betrayal of that trust should be responded to very harshly with genuine outrage. So you have to outrage them with actual justices that occur, and you get that moral high ground, first thing. Second, be more upset about facts and numbers that they don't even know that support the Black Lives Matter mindset. I should say lowercase Black Lives Matter, which we'll get to in a second, right? So be more outraged about facts and numbers that they don't even know that support the Black Lives Matter mindset. For instance, if I had the intent of destroying a race of people, if my stated goal was to take a group of people and destroy them, I would segregate them into the worst schools in the country and force them to go there. I would pump their hearts and minds and souls with the most antisocial music possible, just nonstop, that celebrates violence and premarital sex and extramarital sex and abuse against women and gang pride and crime. And I would tell them it's good and admirable what they're singing about. I would create a financial incentive to either divorce or give birth out of wedlock. The divorce rate of black couples in the 40s was 15%. Today it's 75%, twice as high as white couples. And 75% of young boys and girls, black boys and girls, are growing up without fathers in the home. Okay, so I would financially incentivize that and culturally incentivize it. So there's three things. That would be my three-pronged approach if I was intent on destroying a race or a group of people. No education, feed them a toxic cultural norm, and destroy the family. Oh, and then I'd support an organization that literally kills black babies. That's another thing. If I was intent on killing black people, you would do that. 36% of all abortions are black women. Talk about inequitable, right? Still, there's more black babies aborted every year in New York City than born. So if I wanted to destroy a race, I'd advocate for the killing of that race. So we should all be outraged that this is what's been going on for decades now and has been celebrated the entire time. So yeah, Black Lives Matter. Third thing, fourth thing, I forget. You need to create a disconnect between capital Black Lives Matter and lowercase Black Lives Matter. Lowercase Black Lives Matter is a beautiful marketing strategy, right? No white suburban mom and daughter is going to march through the streets chanting Black Power, right? But they will march through the streets saying Black Lives Matter, because of course Black Lives Matter. But that's very different than capital Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist group that has values and supports goals that are very different than what anyone else is aware of or thinks they're actually marching for. Can we play I want to play the clip again. So I want to find an example. I want to go to their website real quick. Let's kill some time here. But I want to play this clip again of the co-founder of Black Lives Matter telling everyone she's a Marxist. Here.
I also think that it might I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk.
It's interesting. I interpret that last part, and maybe I'm being too harsh, but I hear that as using Black folk for the means of achieving a Marxist end. That's how I interpret that last part. That may be unfair, but the point is the Marxist part right there. So here's from the website. This is the capital Black Lives Matter. We disrupt the Western prescribed, white, nuclear family structure requirement. Followed by the next one, this is from their website. We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. You think the suburban housewife marching down the street chanting Black Lives Matter knows that they're chanting for this stuff? Of course they don't. So people need to know that there's a difference between lowercase Black Lives Matter and capitalized Black Lives Matter, the group Black Lives Matter. Very, very different things. Fourth thing, it's important for people to understand that there are people who have a different perspective. And there's Black people who have a different perspective on this issue. If you are a conservative, certainly in California, but everywhere, you are surrounded by progressives and Democrats all the time. So I live here in San Diego, which is a pretty conservative place in California, but there's progressives all over the place, right? So you encounter people with different viewpoints constantly. You could not function as society if you're not also talking to progressives. If you're a progressive, you don't experience people with a different viewpoint throughout the day. You could go your whole day and only interact with and see fellow progressives. And your social media accounts are only progressives and you only see progressive content, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important for conservatives to let progressives know that there are other Black people out there who don't support the Black Lives Matter mindset and the critical race theory mindset. I think there's a lot of well-intentioned white people who think all Black people feel this one way. And therefore, I, as a white person, must also support the Black Lives Matter movement because all the Black people are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm not racist, so I'm going to prove it. I would put up a list of 10 plus Black intellectuals, not even conservatives. So John McWhorter from Columbia, he's a linguistic professor, not a conservative, hates Trump. Roland Fryer from Harvard, not a conservative. Both of these guys vehemently against the Black Lives Matter movement. Denzel Washington's the most famous person. He's not an intellectual necessarily, right? But he's against all this race baiting stuff. Intellectuals, I put Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, Glenn Lowry, Shelby Steele, Carol Swain. We talked to Carol Swain on the show all the time. Wilfred Riley. We talked to Wilfred Riley last week. He's amazing. Jason Riley, no relation. There's many, many more. These aren't media personalities, right? This isn't a Candace Owens, like a flamethrower, or even a Larry Elder, who we're going to talk to on Thursdays, who's brilliant, but more of just a media guy, right? I'm talking just Black academic intellectuals who are extremely against this Black Lives Matter mindset. I think white people, I'd put up the life of Thomas Sowell growing up in Harlem in the 40s over Colin Kaepernick or even a Barack Obama any day of the week when it comes to overcoming challenges and hurdles and even racism to be successful, and therefore knowing what works and what's possible in America. These Black intellectuals, they know there's a better way, and I think your average liberal, people who want to do good, right, who have their noble intentions manipulated and preyed upon by Marxist activists. I think these well-meaning liberals need to know that there's another way that prominent Black leaders are calling for. So you're not allying with all Black people when you support Black Lives Matter. They're offering not the only path, it's merely one suggested path. It's a terrible path, by the way, but there's alternatives out there that way more sensible people are supporting. And I think the sensible people that you have in your life will realize how much better this other path is if it's presented to them. And they haven't had it presented to them because they are being just bombarded from literally every cultural force working in tandem to deceive them. You're the only lifeline they have. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I've said from the jump, there's people who are not marching in the streets for justice or whatever because they're busy. They're busy actually making justice, actually saving people's lives. In this case, saving their lives. And also, there's this talk about the legacy of slavery out there. Forget about the legacy of slavery. There's real life slavery going on right now in the world. First of all, making your iPhones and stuff. But there's real life slavery in your community right now. What are you talking about? Well, no one's talking about it. We are right now. Jaco Booyens has dedicated his life to it. He's the founder of ShareTogetherNow.org. Jaco, how are you, brother?
Mike, good morning. Thank you. I love that intro. We are in a real epidemic. More slaves today than ever before in human history. We're not talking about oppression. I'm from South Africa, Mike. I lived through apartheid my whole life. I heard sirens go off at 5 o'clock with segregation. I've seen this movie. I've seen the actual version of this movie, right? And what the media is trying to push today, they have no idea. They need to take a trip with me to Africa. Let's go visit for a minute. They'll come back. They'll kiss the ground called the United States of America. They'll thank God that they were born in this country because they don't know what they're talking about. Real slavery going on, children in our country being sold for sex, American kids in the 50 states of the United States of America.
So I live in San Diego, and it's a massive, massive problem, and to say the least, in San Diego. It's huge because of trafficking across the border, obviously. But it's bad everywhere. Can you help us understand the extent of this issue?
Yeah, I want people to think Wall Street for a minute. Think Fortune 500 companies, and then take a company. If sex trafficking was a company, it grosses $32 billion with a B dollars per year inside the United States of America, tax-free. So it's $32 billion net. Where would that rank as a company on Wall Street, as a Fortune 500 company? It's a massive business, and that's American children being sold for sex in the United States of America. And we've never had a commander-in-chief, never in history, that actually acknowledged the problem and then secondly stood up against the problem and said, hey, we can't be the leading nation in the world selling children for sex, but we are. We're the leading nation in the world commercializing sex with children. It's a global issue, of course. It's $150 billion a year of selling children for sex. And this is force, of course. I mean, these are minors. We're talking about under 17. But it's hidden in plain sight because we have embraced this immoral culture in the 60s as the United States, where free sex and free reign and no morality, and our children are paying the price.
I know there's a ton of different ways that this could happen and looks, but can you trace us through the life of one of these girls? How does it start? Where are they from? Where does it end? Give us one example.
I'll give you an example. Well, first, I'd like for people to watch our film 8 Days because it gives them a real depiction of how that happens. But there's different forms of trafficking. Of course, you've got the runaway, the child that is homeless, right? And it's soft target. Foster kids today, massive target. Our foster care system has been infiltrated by pedophiles. The CPS system is corrupt. In the court system, the courts are handing kids over to pedophiles, right? And then, of course, there are kidnappings, for sure. A lot of these are street children, but the fastest rising trend of children being trafficked is in suburbia. It's children being trafficked in neighborhoods, still going to school, trafficked, what's called familial trafficking by someone they know or a family member in our country because it's financially so lucrative. And you can hide it in plain sight. It's almost like society doesn't want to know about it unless we get someone like you that says, come on, we're going to talk about this issue. So those are the forms of trafficking. Now, you traffic a child from the projects very differently than how you traffic a child from suburbia. A child in the projects, you're not gonna traffic that child with attention because negative attention is attention. You traffic them with goods, stuff, clothing, a hairdo, the nail salon, a car, Nikes, the latest sneakers. The child in suburbia, you traffic with attention online because they're attention deprived. Because mom and dad has got a lot of money, they work, and that child's deprived of real love and attention. And social media has been the catalyst. I mean, it's been the fuel on the fire, right? So now your predator, your buyer of sex, which we have to go after in this country. We love going after the pimp. Of course, we got to arrest the pimp and rescue the child. But the guy paying, supply meets demand. We've got to go after demand, man. And the problem with demand in this country is they're fathers, husbands, fathers of two. they're CEOs, they're managers at their corporation, they're in your community, they're Johnny the soccer coach. We lost the Boy Scouts of America last year. Think about that for a second. Because of sexual immorality, because of predatory behavior in the Boy Scouts of America, these predators infiltrate areas where they can be close to children. If they're going to go study, they'll study to go be a pre-K teacher, an elementary school teacher. They'll take time. I equate them to the guys that were flying planes into the Twin Towers. They infiltrated our country. They were trained to be pilots here. They blend into society. They're championed by the moms on the soccer field, and then they're trafficking children, like we saw USA Swimming, USA Swim coach, molesting children, swimmers for years, for decades. They blend into society because Americans predominantly, and I'm a proud immigrant, legal immigrant, proud, okay? But Americans predominantly, Mike, we have no radar. Our radar is so low societally, we don't pay attention. These predators are so skilled.
My best friend works at NCIS, and he for a while he was on the sex crimes, pedophilia, whatever, and that's what he focused on for a couple of years, which is just soul crushing. But I remember I was standing right outside my house, and I said, how prevalent is this? And he goes, oh, and he looked around. I'm in a little suburbia neighborhood. He looked around. And he goes, oh, someone here has a computer full of it, like someone like within sight here. That's how prevalent it is, and that is shocking that, as you said, we never even think about. We talked to a group here in San Diego a while back, and they said that in San Diego, there's gangs, or these, I don't know if they're gangs or these trafficking rings, who have a student in every school looking for the vulnerable girl whose parents just got divorced or something just happened to them in their life that can be preyed upon by the sex traffickers. Have you had that experience too?
100%. Last year, 2019, we trained 100 FBI agents, and we're talking about profiling and how good these guys are, how they can plant somebody in every school. In our film, we depict a 17-year-old boy. This is how it happened at LSU on the campus. You know, the pimps came to some guys and said, hey, we're throwing a party. We don't know any girls. We pay you $200 a girl that you just bring to the party. We just want girls at the party. We want the party to look better. Now, that guy's an accomplice. He's complicit in high school, just taking kids to a party. But they give him a depiction of who they need to bring. This is the kind of girl, you know, she doesn't have a dad, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then they infiltrate, they profile, they scout. This is a massive operation. It's both very organized, Mike, and very unorganized. Of course, there are some cells where it's just one thug that's trafficking women and abusing women. But there's great organization to this. And what I want Americans not to do is to think, oh, it's the Jeffrey Epsteins. It's only Epstein and the billionaires who do this. No. It's in every single zip code. We've arrested everything from the janitor all the way to the billionaires, Epstein. The high school principal, the police chiefs, the network presidents. It doesn't matter because it's sex. It's in every household. Sex and money, right? And so when you pervert it's terrible.
No, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Jaco. I just wanted to give people a little taste here, and I hope we can talk again. I do want this to be a theme of the show, as difficult as it is to talk about. If nothing else, well, a couple things. We don't have time to talk about defunding the police and how much that would affect this stopping of the trade, but I want to forward people to your social media accounts, particularly the Twitter, Booyens, Boyens JACO, Booyens Jaco. And watch about the post that Jaco did about defunding the police and how that would be devastating to stopping these sex traffickers. And I just want people to, if you want to do something about slavery, again, the legacy of slavery, sure, yeah, it's one thing. You can't do anything about the legacy of slavery, but you can stop actual slavery right now by supporting Jaco and all the amazing work he's doing. ShareTogetherNow.org. Jaco, last question real quick. What was the siren you were talking about, the segregation siren back in South Africa? What was that?
There would be a siren would go off in the afternoons. That would be the time for Black individuals to segregate and leave the streets and go back home, right? Nobody's proud of apartheid, but I'll tell you, that nation figured out a way how to get through it. And it's not how it's being done right now. I can tell you right now, burning your country down and defunding the police is insanity. Law and order is needed. We need to champion the police. Yes, there's bad apples. Root them out. No cop wants a bad apple because they're misrepresenting them. Come on, Mike. These are amazing warriors, war heroes in our country. So thank you, and you're one too. I appreciate you so much.
8 days, that's the movie. I got to watch that and get a fuller picture of what's happening here. Jaco Booyens, Jaco, we're going to talk again, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike.
Nice, brother. ShareTogetherNow.org. Mike Slater, true story. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to go to one of my, if not my favorite person on Twitter, and now beyond just Twitter, because he's been on the show before, Pastor Hans Feeney. Pastor, how are you, brother?
Good, how you doing?
Really glad you're here. First, I want to let everyone know that you're speaking at the Issues, Etc. conference on Friday, July 24th, Saturday, July 25th. It's going to be virtual. Molly Hemingway, Mark Hemingway, Matt Walsh, and you, among others, will be speaking. So I want people to sign up and register for that. IssuesEtc.org. Pastor, the reason I want to talk to you, not only to promote that, but I want to talk to you about this culture war that we're in.
Sure.
And what the Christian's role is / should be biblically in it with everything that's going on right now. Where's your heart at with this?
Yeah, I think, after the last round of Supreme Court rulings, in particular the one where Chief Justice Roberts sided with the liberal justices on an issue of regulating abortion clinics, it's very easy, I think, for Christians to feel pretty powerless. There's just kind of this, for decades, this has sort of been the case where, you try and make these political gains. You oftentimes align yourself with people politically that perhaps you don't necessarily have everything in common with, but you think you're going to be common allies on this point. And then you have this problem of, Republicans appoint Supreme Court justices that you hope will vote a certain way to, lead us back towards, limiting abortion, and then, maybe working our way back one day, God willing, to overturning Roe versus Wade. And you just kind of have disappointment after disappointment, so Justice Roberts is kind of fashioning himself to be the new Justice Kennedy. So there's a lot of, obviously a strong sense of powerlessness there where you feel like, everything that you can do that's kind of within your hands is just not working. And it's a good reminder, I think, in the end, that obviously the greatest thing that we can do is pray. That prayer is a far more valuable tool for us and a far more valuable weapon in these kind of cultural and spiritual wars than even voting is. Doesn't mean we shouldn't vote. Doesn't mean that that aspect of things doesn't have a role to play. But certainly we need to remember that imploring our Father in heaven is a far greater strategy than trying to kind of align ourselves with earthly princes who have their own agendas and can't be trusted. So I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. I'm so grateful that you said that, because you either believe that or you don't, right? I mean, like a lot of people may roll their eyes at that and say, oh, that's silly, that's nothing. And that's fine if you believe that, right? But if you do believe in prayer, then yeah, it's the most powerful tool that there is.
Yeah,
is that the right way of saying that, tool, or does that demean it?
Yeah, no. I mean, prayer is certainly a tool. It's a weapon. I mean, I think what is becoming abundantly clear in all of this is that, and not just certainly not just with the abortion issue, but with so many of the cultural battles that we're fighting and that we're seeing, this is just a spiritual crisis. This is not really a matter of Republicans versus Democrats. This is, this is a matter of us fighting against demons, of people being under the spell of the devil. I think when you look at so much of, kind of, for example, the cancel culture that has erupted, this is just something that's born from a generation of people who don't know the things that make for peace. They don't know how it is that they can be considered righteous, even if they don't have the terminology for that. They don't know how it is that they can become holy. And, Christianity offers an answer to that for them. The Christian faith tells them you can't find holiness in yourself, but you can find holiness in the blood of Jesus Christ, which forgives your sins and gives you the right to possess the righteousness of God. And when people reject that, when they're not raised to believe in it, or when they just simply reject it because they've been led to believe that the Christian faith is, full of lies and is nothing but a house for bigoted people or whatever it is, it's not like that quest for righteousness goes away. They still experience that, but then they invent a new religion to try to replace it and to try to acquire that righteousness. And the way people do that now is they look at the people around them, and if you can condemn the people around you, then that makes you more righteous by comparison. And likewise, if you can point out to people that you're opposed to racism, that you're opposed to all of these societal ills, then that's the way that people think, oh, that's how I become a righteous person, is I announce to the world that I'm opposed to this evil. And the problem is that your fellow man is the supplier of the evil, right? So in order to make yourself righteous, it's a market thing. You're demanding, the market is requiring, or is demanding righteousness. And it mines it from outrage, which means that you're going to have to tear apart the reputations of your neighbors in order to get it. And this is such a self-destructive cycle that so it doesn't matter if someone said something awful 30 years ago. You need to find righteousness from that. So it doesn't have anything to do with what the person actually said or what the evil is. It just has to do with, this is the person whose reputation I can rip apart in order to convince myself that I'm a good and holy person. And there's no way out of that outside of the gospel. That's the only solution to the problem.
And that's what I want to set up. First of all, I just want to say I'm so grateful you put that the way you did, because I've been trying to grasp it, and I've been kind of going down this road of this movement or whatever's going on is full of people who are lacking a meaning and purpose. Those are kind of the words that I've been kind of hanging around. But I like this idea of how did you put it? Like they want to acquire righteousness. I like that a little more than meaning and purpose. I think we're all in the same ballpark, but I like how you put that better. So give me the alternative, and as you were going to with the gospel, what is the Christian worldview look like instead of what our secular worldview is pitching?
Yeah, so the secular worldview with regard to righteousness, and this is the worldview of pretty much most religions outside of Christianity as well, is that righteousness is something that you create. It's something that you manufacture from within yourself. Whether that's by, in people's minds, following the Ten Commandments or any other sort of man-made laws, whether that's by speaking the right things, by holding to the right views. People in the secular world, it's really just kind of its own works-based religion that says you are the one who's responsible for making yourself a holy person. And of course, our culture is profoundly lazy, so people don't actually want to do stuff. They don't want to give their money to the poor or live sexually pure and decent lives. In that way, they want to find the cheapest, easiest righteousness they can, which comes from tearing apart other people and propping up other kind of virtues that aren't hard to do. But the Christian worldview is that righteousness comes from outside of ourselves. Righteousness comes from God himself, that the righteousness God requires us to have is righteousness that God himself actually provides to us in the blood of Jesus. So the great thing about viewing the world from a Christian lens when it comes to encountering the sins of your neighbor is that you recognize that the holiness of Jesus Christ is what you need. You actually need to be as holy as God in order to inherit eternal life. You're not going to inherit eternal life by being slightly less racist than your neighbors and slightly less sinful than your neighbors. The only way to inherit eternal life is to be as holy as God is. And in the cross, Jesus gives that holiness to you, which means that you don't need to manufacture it yourself, which means you don't need to go do what the secular world does, which is, pierce through the flesh of your neighbor and try and mine righteousness out of him and out of all of his sins. So the Christian faith actually implores you to forgive your neighbor, because that's the loving response born from recognizing that God has forgiven you. And a society that's built on forgiveness is the only society that can actually get better. Because if you don't permit people the chance to turn away from their sins, if people can't grow, if people are just constantly having to live in fear of saying the wrong thing, that doesn't actually open up the opportunity for them to turn away, to actually find the forgiveness that they need, to turn from their guilt, which is the only thing that's actually going to cause them to love people. So, if you're worried about people saying racist things, the solution to that problem is not to let people know, if you ever say anything that's racially insensitive, we're going to destroy your life over it, because all that does is it causes people to live in fear, and then it doesn't teach them to love. It just creates another avenue of, these are the people that we're allowed to be awful to. So in other words, a person who's racist today, the second he learns that it's not okay to be racist, that doesn't make him a loving person. It just makes him become hateful towards racists. Whereas what the Christian faith offers is, the Christian faith actually offers you the opportunity to recognize that because your sins have been put away, and because your neighbor's sins have been put away with that same blood of Jesus, then you can actually love and forgive your neighbor. And that love is actually what causes people to turn from their hatred.
Okay, Pastor, I have a million other questions. Not so much I have questions, I just want to keep talking to you.
Sure.
But I also want everything you just said to just sit right there, because that's so much goodness, that's so much truth in one bite. I just want people to just meditate and pray on that.
Sure.
Can you come back again and talk some more?
Yeah, I'd love to. Absolutely.
Because that's the answer, man. That's the answer. I don't hear it anywhere. So I'm just grateful. I'm great, because I can tell you've obviously thought so deeply about it, and that's why you can articulate. So anyway, I'm grateful. I could go on and on. Issuesetcetera.org to partake in the virtual conference that's going on. Matt Walsh, Molly Hemingway, among others, are going to be there, and Pastor Reverend Hans Feeney, and then HANSFIENE on Twitter. Reverend, keep up the wonderful work, sir. We'll do it again.
Hey, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, brother. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.